Hello, everybody. Greetings, book lovers everywhere, and welcome to E-Train Talks. I'm your host, E-Train, and welcome back to the podcast where we explore the world of storytelling, authorship, and inspiration one conversation at a time. Today, I'm incredibly honored to welcome a very special guest to the show. She's a leading voice in celebrating Jewish children's and young adult literature, and she's the amazing host of the Book of Life podcast, a podcast about Jewish kidlit, mostly. I am thrilled, everybody, to introduce the wonderful Heidi Rabinowitz. For the past 20 years, Heidi has been a leading voice in celebrating Jewish children's and young adult literature, shining a spotlight on stories that reflect Jewish identity, culture, and experiences. Welcome to the show. I'm thrilled you could join me today.
Thank you, E-Train. It is delightful to be here.
Well, it's a delight that you're here, and I'm just so happy you could come speak to us and help celebrate the Book of Life's Platinum anniversary, the 20th anniversary, everybody. How amazing is that? 20 years of spotlighting Jewish books, and the podcast world hasn't been around for that long, maybe around 20 years. So we'll get into that later in the show, but for now, as we are in Jewish American Heritage Month at the time of recording, it's the perfect time to recognize the powerful impact that you're making on the Jewish book world. So, if you're ready, Heidi, let's dive in.
Yes, please.
So a couple years back, I had the opportunity to be featured on your wonderful podcast, The Book of Life, Jewish kidlit mostly. And excitingly enough, your podcast is celebrating its 20th anniversary, which is phenomenal. So will you share a bit about the Book of Life podcast and how your journey first started into podcastship?
Yes, thank you, E-Train. So first of all, it was a delight to have you on my show. And I've always felt kind of bad that your episode actually came out on October 2nd, 2023. So it kind of got overshadowed a bit, maybe a lot, by the shock of Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th, 2023, just 5 days later. So hopefully this will remind people to go back and listen to your interview. But I'm so happy to finally trade the hot seat with you. So like the Book of Life, the Book of Life, like E-Train Talks, is an interview show. And like you, I talk to the creators of children's and young adult books. But in my case, the focus is specifically on Jewish books because I'm a children's librarian in a synagogue library. And because of my job, I'm also very involved with the Association of Jewish Libraries, which is a professional organization for people like me, people who work with Jewish literature and Jewish libraries. And AJL is we call it the leading authority on Judaic librarianship, which is really true. And many years ago, I was the chair of the association's Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee, which awards the best Jewish kids and teen books every year. It's like the Jewish Newbery or Caldecott. So in 2005, I was wrapping up my term on the award committee, and I had been reading and discussing over 100 books every year. And I got into podcasting as a way to stay immersed in that world of Jewish kidlit and keep promoting the books to readers everywhere.
Well, I'm so glad you're doing what you do. And I mean, it's understandable. We had no idea the October 7th attacks are going to occur. So yeah, like Heidi said, maybe check that out. But in general, I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing with when it comes to either AJL or just the Book of Life in general, because we need to spotlight Jewish books, especially now in the world that we live in any way possible. So kind of circling back and continuing with your podcast, what are some of your favorite podcasting memories over the past 20 years?
Okay, so I've got a number of them because it's been 20 years. But one I've talked about before, my most favorite memory is interviewing the late Sims Tabak about his picture book, 2 picture books at the time. We talked about Joseph Had a Little Overcoat and Kibitzers and Fools. And this was back in 2006, in the first year of the podcast. And he was delightful. And he sang to me in Yiddish because Joseph Had a Little Overcoat is actually based on a folk song, Hobich Miramantel. And so anyway, he was kind of rambly, and he realized that he was rambling in our conversation, but I edited and I made him sound really good. And so I spoke to him later, and he said to me, "You saved my tuchus." And I said, "Great, will you draw me a picture?" And he did. And there it is, this picture right here hanging on my dining room wall. So it's a joy every time I look at it. You can see it's sort of an old-fashioned Jewish man with an iPod, and he's dancing with his cat and his dog. So that is one of my very favorite memories. But do you want me to go on? I have a few more if you'd like.
Of course.
Sure. Okay. So in 2009. This was actually, I was happy you asked me this because it was a real trip down memory lane when you warned me about this question, and I was trying to think of interesting things. In 2009, the Association of Jewish Libraries had a conference in Chicago, and I got to visit the Planet Esme Book Room, which was a kind of a literary salon for kids' books, created by the author Esme Raji Kodel. And it was just like a wonderland for kidlit nerds. And she hosted a party for people from the conference. So I got to just sit on the floor in this wonderful space with a bunch of authors, and we recorded a very free-flowing podcast episode there. Another favorite was in 2015. I went to a film screening of a documentary called The Outrageous Sophie Tucker. Sophie Tucker was a Jewish singer and comedian and TV and film and radio personality in the early 20th century. She was a superstar at the time. So after this movie, I sat down with the husband and wife filmmakers, and we went and sat in their car as a makeshift sound booth and recorded an interview. And they were just so excited and enthusiastic about sharing Sophie Tucker's story. They actually wrote a companion book that went with the movie. So that was really fun. Another thing I wanted to tell you was in 2019, I had an interview that led to a night of board games, because I interviewed Jonathan Auxier about his novel, his middle grade novel, Sweep, The Story of a Girl and Her Monster. And that was a Sidney Taylor Book Award winner. So in the interview, we discussed the fact that we both are board game fans. And then he came to the conference to receive his award. So we ended up late in the evening playing a game I had brought with me on purpose. We played Super Fight, which is a very fun game. And so Jonathan Auxier and the illustrator Paul Zielinski and a lot of librarians, and we were sitting around playing this board game. And I actually recorded us playing the game to be sort of a bonus episode of the podcast. One more memory I'll share with you. So in 2023, I interviewed Arthur Levine, who, besides being an author, is a publisher. He used to be with Scholastic. Now he runs Levine Corrido, his own publishing house. And the interview touched upon the fact that because they really focus on publishing diverse books, they are especially under attack, and it's hurting their business. So some other authors who I believe you know, Hannah Stiefel and Lisa Weimer, they heard this interview and it inspired them to set up an auction, which raised thousands of dollars to support Levine Corrido.
That's awesome.
That was very gratifying that the podcast led to that action. So there's a bunch of fun memories from the past 20 years.
Absolutely. And I mean, the work that you've done, and I mean, I just want to circle back to the last memory that you shared. It's just a demonstration of the power that using your voice and having a platform and using it wisely can really make a big impact. And continuing on with 20 years of the Book of Life, that's a long time. I'm actually not even 20 years old, in case you couldn't tell.
Yeah, I've literally been doing this since before you were born. Yeah.
That's wild to think about. And, the first podcast actually really started up about 20 years ago, back in 2004, which means that the Book of Life was likely one of the first, if not the first podcast to celebrate specifically Jewish storytellers. So in what ways have your podcast episodes and your podcast in general changed over the years? And why do you think you've been able to continue your journey for as long as you have, while other shows have surely faded away?
Well, it's true. When I started podcasting, I often had to explain to people what it was. I was always telling people it's like radio, but on demand. So I've definitely seen other shows come and go in the last 20 years. In fact, one of my favorite podcasts in the 2000s was not about Jewish children's books, but a children's book podcast called Just One More Book. And it was this great show where a Canadian husband and wife would go to their favorite coffee shop and record their conversation talking about the books they read with their kids.
That's so sweet.
It was a wonderful show, but it's long gone, and I can't even find the audio online now. But the Book of Life has changed, and it hasn't changed. So when I began, each episode had multiple short segments with different guests, and then I would put it together, a mix of authors and musicians and filmmakers and people with other creative Jewish projects. And it was really fun, but it was also a lot of work that I was imposing on myself. Nobody told me I had to do this. So around 2009, I realized I was making myself crazy for no good reason. and I moved to focusing on just one theme or one guest or one book per episode. And this let me spend more time with each thing and do a deeper dive with each guest.
Right.
And then eventually I tightened the focus to kids' books, because that's really what I'm most interested in. People would pitch me, would email me pitching me like adult books, and I would think, well, that sounds really boring. Why do I want to talk about that? So, I realized I should just make it a rule that I'm focusing on kids' books here. But the thing that has stayed the same and that has kept me going for 20 years is that it's just as exciting as it ever was to talk to all these creative people about their work. So when I go back and I listen to early episodes, I hear that same curiosity in my voice, and I hear that same passion in the guests' voices. And so that's evergreen and keeps me going.
That's amazing. And I mean, I can certainly imagine just the passion. I can hear it in your episodes. I can hear it now, the passion you have for Jewish stories, and it really inspires me. So, and also I have to say, I love the idea of just talking about children's books. That's typically what I do. It's just like, why? I mean, I understand the appeal of adult books, but I mean, children's books are so exciting. There's so much love, joy, passion. There's always happy endings. So I love that. And I know firsthand it's not always easy to name a favorite book, name a favorite podcast episode, name a favorite anything. I mean, naming a favorite food can be difficult. But if you could, out of all the authors you've had the chance to talk with on the Book of Life, which interviews hold an extra special place in your heart? One that may have been on your bucket list earlier? And is there a storyteller that you've not yet interviewed that you'd love to feature on your show in the future? Maybe they're listening now.
So before I answer that question, I just wanted to say you're so right about children's books. And in many ways, I feel personally, for me, they're superior often to adult books because they focus on hope and positivity. And I don't want to get depressed through my reading. I don't want to hear about somebody's midlife crisis. I want to hear about how the world can be a better place. So children's books excel at that. So I really was thinking hard about your question about a bucket list interview. And I will tell you that a very recent interview that basically was a bucket list thing for me was Dara Horn. And Dara Horn is a great novelist for adults, and she has now written a graphic novel for kids, One Little Goat, a Passover Catastrophe. And she also wrote the very famous collection of essays for adults called People Love Dead Jews, Reports from a Haunted Present. It's a really kind of groundbreaking book. What I really love about her, besides her writing, is she is just such an outside-the-box thinker. And she just has this deep, deep understanding of Jewish history that enables her to explain how Jews fit into the world and why we sometimes don't fit into the world in a way that nobody else explains. I think she's just remarkable. So that was really special to talk to her. And then for the future, I was thinking, is there somebody who I wish I could interview and I can't get to them? And really, in the world of Jewish children's books, it's a small community. And so you can pretty much, you can find anybody. You can get to them and ask them to be on the show. And the only time I ever had anybody turn me down was somebody who had social anxiety. And they agreed to record it if I just sent them the questions and they could record it in the privacy of their own home without having to talk to me face to face. But people, authors want to get the word out about their book. So it's pretty rare that anybody would say no. But I guess for the future, a real pie in the sky goal might be to interview Terry Gross, because Fresh Air on NPR was really the model that I used when I created the Book of Life. And Terry Gross is Jewish. So
that would be a fantastic guest. And I mean, really anybody in the Jewish book world or Jewish world in general, they're always, most of the time, great guests. So besides hosting a podcast, like you mentioned earlier, you are a Judaica librarian at Congregation B'nai Israel in your area, in your state of Florida. So what Jewish books are flying off the shelves right now?
Well, honestly, I, in my day job, mainly work with early childhood education. And we use both Jewish books and secular books because, to go with all of the subjects in their curriculum. So I don't really have firsthand knowledge of what the big kids are reading. But in terms of what Jewish books are being published for kids and for teens, I can tell you about that. We are getting much wider representation, which is terrific. We're getting books about all aspects of the Jewish experience these days. Jews of color, Sephardic Jews, Jews from places beyond Eastern Europe or beyond New York City, LGBTQ plus Jews, secular Jews, Orthodox Jews, like everything is finally getting some representation. And we're getting genre fiction. So all of this representation takes place not only in contemporary and historical fiction, but also in fantasy and in thrillers and in rom-coms. So the publishing trends are very exciting.
Yeah, I love it. And I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later, the different trends you've seen in Jewish books and what you might be missing. But moving on to the next question that I have for you, which I'm really curious to know about. I read that you served, and you actually mentioned it earlier, you served as a chair and judge for the Sidney Taylor Book Award Committee. And for those who don't know, also Heidi mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate in case maybe you had you were on your phone dilly-dallying while you're supposed to be listening to this. The Sidney Taylor Book Award is the most prestigious award given to Jewish children's books, with both awards and honors recognizing picture books, middle grade, and young adult books. So, can you share a bit more about the history behind the Sidney Taylor Book Awards, how you became involved with the awards committee in general, and what the experience has been like for you?
Well, I love that you're asking me about the Sidney Taylor Book Award. It's very dear to my heart. The Sidney Taylor Book Award is the only award that focuses solely on Jewish kidlit. There are other Jewish book awards that have children's literature categories, but this one is just for children's and teen books. It's managed by the Association of Jewish Libraries. It's sponsored by Jo Taylor Marshall. Jo is the daughter of Sidney Taylor, who was the author of the classic All of a Kind Family series of middle grade books about 5 Jewish sisters growing up on the Lower East Side at the turn of the last century. And these were the first books that were popular mainstream books with Jewish characters. They are still beloved by readers of all backgrounds to this day. So that's sort of how the award came to be. AJL gave its first award in 1968, and the first winning book was The Endless Steppe by Esther Hautzig. And on the AJL website, the Sidney Taylor section lists every book that has ever gotten a gold or a silver or a bronze in all age categories, every author who's ever received the Body of Work Award. So you can get very thorough information there. And in fact, we will soon be adding a Sidney Taylor portal to the website where you'll be able to learn more about Sidney Taylor's life and work, as well as more about the award that is named in her memory. So that's at jewishlibraries.org. But in terms of my experience, being on the award committee was one of the most fun things I've ever done. Reading all the books, discussing them with the other book nerds on the committee, getting to meet the authors at the AJL conference. When I was the chair, getting to be the one who gave the authors the good news that they had won. It was all just so much fun. And then promoting it was also really fun. I used to go to Book Expo, which was a conference of the American Booksellers Association. Sadly, they no longer hold this conference anymore. But they used to fill a convention center with booths from all the different publishers, and you could go up and down the aisles, and you would get tote bags and swag and advanced review copies of new forthcoming books, and it was like trick or treat for readers. And when I was chair of the committee, I would go to Book Expo, and I would make these packets with information about the Sidney Taylor Book Award. Like I would put in a brochure and a bookmark and a CD-ROM, because that's how long ago it was, with information on it. And I would pass these out to the publishers. And I even had these little golden lapel pins made that looked like the award seal. And I would pass them out and ask people to put them on just to try to raise awareness about the award. So it's a wonderful thing to do. And any Judaic librarians who are members of the Association of Jewish Libraries who might be listening, I just encourage you that this is a committee you might want to consider serving on someday, because it's really awesome.
That would be amazing. Yeah. So diving deeper into the Sidney Taylor Book Award, I discovered that you also write for the Sidney Taylor Schmooze. And in fact, if my information is correct, the Sidney Taylor Schmooze has actually even shared some early book predictions at the Youth Media Awards and maybe even gotten them right. So I'm curious to know what goes into making these predictions. And in your opinion, what sets award-winning Jewish books apart from the rest of the Jewish books, which are still amazing?
Well, I'm actually one of the editors of the Sidney Taylor Schmooze. This is a project that I created with 2 friends who are also past chairs of the Sidney Taylor Book Award, Susan Kusel and Chava Pinchuk. And we created it originally to be a mock award blog, but it sort of morphed into a review blog instead. The predictions have all actually just been by popular vote, so they don't have any real science behind them, so to speak. But that said, I will tell you my opinion about what sets apart books that are worthy of winning the award. Like any winning book, they have to be beautifully written. They have to be compelling, emotionally satisfying. If they're illustrated, they have to have gorgeous art that fits the story. But in particular, for this award, they need to have Jewish content that is accurate and authentic and well-researched. And they don't have to be written by a Jewish author. That's actually part of the rules. And we have had winners who are not Jewish, but the author really has to just do their homework so that they know what they're talking about. And that actually goes for Jewish authors as well. Just being born Jewish doesn't make you an expert. So you really need to do your homework either way.
Yeah, I mean, winning awards are obviously very difficult, and writing the right Jewish book, not even just for an award, but in general, having everything right, like you said, doing your research, it's super important. Plus, when you write Jewish books or write books about any culture or any ethnicity or sexual orientation, having the facts are so important because this is the opportunity to showcase who you are and who people like you are. And even if you're not Jewish, it's a chance to showcase a culture that is super important to learn about. So you have to have all your facts right, like Heidi Rabinowitz said. And yeah, as someone who has spent much of your time and your career studying and celebrating Jewish stories, what topics or themes do you believe are still underrepresented in Jewish-themed children's books? And do you think that current authors are effectively addressing the needs of today's Jewish readers? Or are there specific messages or subjects that you feel need more attention?
Well, as I mentioned, the diversity of Jewish representation has been expanding so much, and that is wonderful. And the topics getting covered have also been expanding. But some areas that I think could use some more attention. As I said, I work in early childhood. Jewish books for early childhood, we do need more for the youngest kids. I do 20 odd story times for preschoolers every week. And there are a large number of Jewish picture books published each year, but most of them are not actually preschool friendly. They're great for like elementary school and up even. Some of them are very sophisticated. And some of these might work at home one-on-one with a preschooler, but for, a large group of kids doing story time in the library, they're not necessarily the attention grabbers or simple enough for that kind of situation. So I would really love to see more super simple Jewish books for babies through age 4. And I would also love to see more early readers with controlled vocabulary for kids just starting to read, which also tend to make great read alouds, as well as being good for those early readers. Beyond that, Jewish fantasy has been growing, but we still really could use some more Jewish science fiction. And we always need more graphic novels. And definitely we need more books set in Israel during all periods of history from ancient to modern times. There is actually a wish list that we put together for the Sydney Taylor Schmooze website. And I can give you a link to that to put in the show notes so that if any authors are listening, they can take a look at that list for inspiration.
Yeah, that is definitely send me that because that is something that is super duper needed. And I mean, Jewish stories, there are so many great ones out there, and there are so many topics that are covered in Jewish books. But I for one totally agree with you about the picture book specifically because, I also like to read aloud books to kids, and a lot of picture books, not just Jewish picture books, but a lot of picture books, they're more oriented, like you said, towards kindergartners, towards lower elementary school kids, and there's a lot of words. It can be difficult. I personally, my mom read me board books when I was maybe 1 or 2, and those are really special. So bring those back. And I think also PJ Library is a great source for that as well. They have books that are both new, that are just recently coming out, and also ones from the past, ones that maybe be nostalgic. Check PJ Library out if you maybe are a new Jewish parent, a parent of Jewish kids, or yeah. Anyway, after that little rant or ramble by me, my next question for you is, since it's Jewish American Heritage Month, it's a great time to celebrate Jewish stories. So can you share a few children's or YA books that you think really capture what it's like growing up Jewish in the United States of America? Stories that highlight meaningful themes or experiences? And also, what impact do you think these kinds of stories have on both Jewish and non-Jewish readers? Do you see them helping to build empathy or understanding in any particular way? That's like three questions in one, so interpret that or answer them as you will.
Okay. Well, I think all Jewish books and all diverse books help build empathy and understanding, by creating an emotional connection with the reader, putting them into the shoes of people unlike themselves. So I want to tell you about a few books that I think shed light on being Jewish in America. And I will tell you one for each age range, for picture books, middle grade, and young adults. I want to show you a picture book, a middle grade, and a YA book that I think are great examples that can help readers, Jewish and non-Jewish readers, learn something about Jewish life in America. So for picture books, I wanted to show you More Than Enough by Richard Michelson, illustrated by Joseph Pita, and this is inspired by Maimonides' Golden Ladder of Giving. So this is a book about tzedakah, which is the Hebrew word that's commonly translated as charity, but it really means justice. So this is a story about the Jewish concept of taking care of the community. I think it's a beautiful idea, a beautiful Jewish idea to share with the world. And it's especially important right now in our American society, which is undergoing so much distress. So for picture books, More Than Enough is my suggestion. For middle grade, I've got Golem Crafters, which is by Emi Watanabe Cohen. And I would definitely urge people to read this. It is a fantasy book that is about a pair of Jewish Japanese-American siblings. And they learn that their family has, for centuries, been in the golem crafting business, and a golem is a sort of Frankenstein, a clay Frankenstein monster from folklore created to defend a Jewish community against violence. So there's a lot of fantasy adventure in this book, but what is most striking about it is the way it really shows what it feels like to be on the receiving end of anti-Semitism, to be hated and feared for no good reason, and how that messes with your head and how you can deal with it. So that's another excellent book. And then for young adult, for YA, I didn't have a print copy here, so I put it on my iPad so you could see. This is When the Angels Left the Old Country by Sasha Lamb. And this was, as you can also see, it's a multiple award winner. You can see all the seals on there.
Right.
And this is like a Jewish version of Good Omens, about an angel and a demon who are Torah study partners. And they immigrate together to America, and they get involved in a lot of harrowing adventures with the labor movement on the Lower East Side, which is a very Jewish scene. Both the Lower East Side and the labor movement are very Jewish scenes. And it's a historical fantasy romance adventure. So those are all highly recommended.
Well, so check those out, everybody. And I actually have not read any of those books yet, so they're definitely going on my to-be-read list. And after 20 years of the Book of Life behind you, what does the future hold for your amazing podcast and any other projects you're involved with that you can share with us? What does the future hold for those? Or what will be coming?
Well, to celebrate the 20th year of the Book of Life podcast, I started a newsletter on Substack, and it's at bookoflifepodcast.substack.com. And when you subscribe to this newsletter, you get the podcast episodes and the show notes, but you also get a transcript of each episode, and you get Jewish Kidlit news and calls to action. So it's sort of, it's like a souped up version of what you get by just going to the website, and it goes to your email, to your inbox, so you don't have to remember to go and look at the website. So I would love to have your listeners sign up for this newsletter. And I'm always juggling a lot of different projects, so I have a few others I would love to share with you. I would love people to know about Holiday Highlights, which is an AJL committee that I run along with Susan Kussel, my friend and fellow librarian. We gather a committee of Jewish Kidlit experts to create a recommended reading list each spring and each fall of the best new kids' books coming out about Jewish holidays. It's for casual shoppers. For them, it can be hard to identify anything beyond Hanukkah books because they're often not prominently displayed or easily available. So we want to make it easy for people to know what is the best of the best, what should they be looking for. And I'd also like to mention Jewish Kidlit Mavens, which is the Facebook community that Susan and I created in 2019. And you are a member, you are a Maven. It's an online home for librarians and educators and authors and publishers and anybody with a strong interest in Jewish kids books. So we've got over 2,000 members, including E-Train. Yeah. And we're very happy to have listeners join the group as well.
It seems that we have a very special thing in common. We have a shared love for reading, storytelling, and advocating for Jewish children's literature. So, in your view, what does it truly mean to advocate for Jewish stories today? And with the rise in anti-Semitism and book banning, how can we, as a community, work together and uplift and promote Jewish-themed stories?
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, E-Train, for all you do to promote literacy and for featuring Jewish books prominently among all the other books that you promote. You actually have an advantage over me in a way because your broader focus on all kidlit can attract an audience who doesn't know yet that they might be interested in Jewish books. But once they become a fan of yours, then they'll end up learning about the Jewish books along with the rest. So that's great. And I also love that you have a section celebrating Jewish storytellers on your website. And oh, and I saw that there's a cartoon there by Alan Silberberg that he drew of you with some Hamantash and friends. It's a riot. But part of what keeps me going, besides the fun of talking to authors, is the belief that Jewish books can help inoculate readers against anti-Semitism, just as all diverse books can help readers learn empathy. And I want Jewish readers to get validation from these books, but I also really want non-Jewish readers to get to know us and understand us by reading these books. So I love your question about what the community can do. Last November, for Jewish Book Month, I actually gave an online talk from my local public library, and it was called Cheering on Jewish Books. Yay! And it was a 20-minute presentation that gave a lot of practical advice about what anyone can do. And I can give you a link for your show notes because it's still available on YouTube and also as an episode of the Book of Life. But just quickly to give you a few tips of things people can do, people can support Jewish books by buying them, by reviewing them on places like Amazon and Goodreads, borrowing them from the library because it helps the library statistics to know which books are getting used. Ask your local library and your local bookstore to do displays and events for Jewish American Heritage Month in May, for Jewish Book Month in November, or technically it's the 30 days leading up to Hanukkah, but essentially November. Amplify Jewish books on social media. Recommend them to your friends in person. Suggest Jewish titles for your book club to read. And a good one is to leave supportive comments on other people's social media posts about Jewish books, especially because those posts sometimes get anti-Semitic comments on them. So you can kind of counterbalance that with some positivity. And I think this is especially important if there's like a public library or a mainstream publisher who's being a good ally by posting about Jewish books, and then they're getting anti-Semitic pushback. It's even more important to provide some positive comments and thank them for being an ally. So, and of course, you can listen to and share Jewish podcasts about Jewish books, like some of your episodes and all of my episodes. So I'll be happy to give you a link to that Cheering on Jewish Books presentation I did so people can get all of the good advice.
You know, it is time, sadly, but also excitedly, because this is a great question that I love asking. But it is time for the final question of the interview. It's a tough one, so no pressure. If you could be or meet any literary character, you could meet your favorite author or your favorite character in a book. Who would it be and why?
I was glad you gave me a heads up about this because I had to think hard. But I think I would like to meet Ella and Henny and Sarah and Charlotte and Gertie from All of a Kind family. And they are both fictional and real because they were based on the author's own family. So Sarah in the book is Sydney Taylor. She actually changed her name to Sydney when she got older because she thought it sounded more sophisticated. And in a way, I have kind of gotten this wish because I'm lucky enough to have become friends with Sydney Taylor's daughter, Jo Taylor Marshall, who, as I mentioned, is the sponsor of the book award. She is an 88-year-old firecracker, and she's so much fun to hang out with. So I kind of got the wish.
That is an amazing answer. And I mean, that's just a perfect cherry on top to a wonderful interview. Thank you so much for joining me today, Heidi. It has been such an honor to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the Book of Life podcast with you and to learn more about your incredible journey in the Jewish kidlit world.
I am so honored to be on your show, E-Train. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And your dedication to sharing meaningful stories and promoting Jewish representation in books is so inspiring. It inspires me every time I listen to an episode of your show. You are truly making a difference in our world. And to all our listeners, If you've not already, be sure to check out the Book of Life, Jewish Kidlit Mostly podcast, and explore the wonderful world of Jewish children's and YA books, because, trust me, you are not going to regret it. And also, check out the Jewish Kidlit Mavens. Check out everything in Jewish books. And of course, as always, check out the Book of Life podcast, because you will not be disappointed. That's 20 years worth of incredible interviews with Jewish authors and just Jewish book love shared on such a beautiful, such a wide scale. So, that's all for now. See you in the next one, everybody. Bye.
Well, E-Train, thank you so much. I think it's the Mutual Appreciation Society. Everything nice you just said about me applies to you. So I hope people will check out both of our shows at the same time.
Thank you. Do that, everybody. Bye-bye.